So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to the Palinor Fields, where today we'll be having a look at a free-for-all, a three-person free-for-all, so it's a 1v1v1, which always turns out a little bit differently to a four-person free-for-all, as in that case it will usually sort of break off into two 1v1s and then a final battle of all the units that everyone has left, which can be entertaining, but a bit of variety every now and then is important, which is actually why I've chosen this battle to do today, because I do have three larger scale battles, two sieges, one on Thranduil's Halls and one on the Grey Havens, and I also have a Mountain Pass battle which I want to show, but I've done all three of those fairly recently, especially the Mountain Pass one, which I did the video before last. But I will be doing the Mountain Pass one next, I think, and then we'll be moving into the two sieges. I just want to have give it a little bit of time between the points where I use similar or the same maps, as it were, because I think I've shown Thranduil's Halls about 4 or 5 times at this point. But it is a good map, so we will be seeing that at some point next week. Now, there have been sort of movings on the Discord about sort of various new aspects of testing that have come to my attention, and mainly this comes down to the fact that most people that watch my videos, I'm sure, are on the Discord anyway, so they might well have noticed it. I haven't actually been told a great deal about it, but there is now a section on the Discord called single player testers, so I can only assume that they are making the initial moves to add a single player mode to Reforged. Doubtless that will take quite a while to make, but I'm sure that some people would be quite happy to note that at the very least work may very well have started on that, so that's interesting. But again, for information like that, you're much better off waiting for word on the official Discord or from JMonster, who is actually a developer and not just a pleb like me. But to the battle at hand, and we have obviously the free-for-all, and HD 1080p is the player that sent me in this replay, and it's going to be the evil triumvirate of men, Harad, Rune and Umbar over here. So we've got the Belagire archers. Under normal circumstances, they will win you a skirmish fight because of how resilient they are. They've got a shield value, they've got good armor values as well. Not the most highly damaging archers, but they will still get the job done. But I think there's only 2 units, maybe even just the one, that they've spread out here. Yeah, I think it is just the one. Probably not going to win a skirmish fight if any of the others have brought an extensive archer line. However, we do have some Castamir's Rangers over here as well. The polar opposite, really, in terms of philosophy to the Belagire Archers. Castamir's Rangers, of course, that body piercing can make them very deadly indeed. And then back here we have the primary line, a combination of Corsair Pikemen and Castamir's Legion. Good front line, the Castamir's Legion, obviously. Much more expensive, very good front line units, but the Corsair Pikemen will also give them the reach, the additional damage, and of course it will make their front line significantly more solid, and it will make the Castamir's Legion a much less tempting target for cavalry charges, whether from the front or behind. And then just in behind there we've got some Corsair infantry as well, quite a lot of Corsair infantry. In fact, none of them have got the armour upgrade, but this is very much where Umbar's Orc influence comes into play. They've got obviously a lot of numbers in these Corsair infantrymen, similar in many ways to a unit such as the Orc Marauders or even the Heavy Goblin Infantry from the Misty Mountains. That's the sort of performance you can expect from these guys. Not the highest of quality, but they do offer a lot of numbers, and you know, it's going to be a lot of Umbar men that the other two factions will have to kill their way through in order to rout their infantry entirely. And then at the back we've got 2 units of hidden Corsair Blackguards. Obviously they can do a lot of damage with their javelins, and they're not half bad in melee either with their dual scimitars. But it is worth saying that against a genuinely elite, dedicated infantry unit, melee infantry unit, the Corsair Blackguards will often not win, and also because they don't have multiple HP, they can be very vulnerable to arrow fire with their lack of a shield. And then over here we have our Pharazon the Golden, who is going to be riding with his Warlords of Umbar. Obviously a knight unit, very, very important on an open field battle like this if you bring the knights to use them well because of how expensive they are, but they are also devastating. And then over here we can see the other more expensive Umbar cavalry, the Númenórean Lancers. Obviously they are not quite as good in melee with other cavalry as the Warlords of Umbar, and nor do they have multiple HP either, but they are very deadly off the charge and they can move around the battlefield quite swiftly as well. So let's go and have a look at Harad, which have got some very interesting tactical geometry going on here. And at the front here we've got some Haradrim Spearmen in loose formation. Longbard is playing as this, by the way, playing as Harad, excuse me. He's got some Haradrim Spearmen. In the last battle we saw in the an RP replay between Lyndon and Harad, the Haradrim Spearmen were very much used as the sacrificial lambs. Looks as though that's going to be the case again, as they are sort of out in front over here in loose formation. Just in behind there we've got Muhard Beast Tamers, seemingly forming the first part of the tactical geometry. And they've also got some Muhard Berserkers here at the back, who will be vulnerable to cav charges, but having said that, they are also quite deadly shock infantry, obviously. And then just in behind there we've got some Muhad Beast Hunters, so some Javelins, some Demons of the Desert, some more Javelins, and some more Muhad Beast Hunters, so an interesting little defensive position here. I can only assume that Harad intends, there might very well be some hidden archers in here as well, I'm not sure, but I can only assume Harad intends to keep his infantry fairly static and be very aggressive with his extensive mounted force over here, do as much damage as he can, and then hopefully outlast whatever is left with his infantry over here. Obviously he has some Mumakil, which can potentially be devastating, very, very difficult to bring down. Although I believe Rune may very well have a tool that can deal with them, but Umbar might struggle a little bit more. We'll see. The Black Serpents, which is going to be the Harad General, so he's going to be riding with his Black Serpent bodyguards. They are multiple HP Lancers, as opposed to Knight units, but the Black Serpents somewhat make up for this by being incredibly fast around the battlefield. They are one of the swiftest cav to behold, and honestly, if they're getting caught by anti-cavalry units, you're probably using them wrong, because they can definitely duck and dive for a long period of time before they get captured. We've got some Serpent Guard as well, which are basically the same thing, only not quite as high in terms of stats, and they're not multiple HP either. And then we've got some Harajan Raiders as well, which I actually said in the last battle, you don't see these guys in a free pick too often. But as far as Sacrificial Horse Archers go, they can be pretty good as well, so we'll see how well they do. Although I must say, with 3 units of Raiders, they might struggle somewhat. Both Rune and especially Umbar, under normal circumstances, can absorb a fair amount of arrow fire, so it'll be interesting to see how effective they are. And again, more sort of tactical geometry here with these sort of bent lines to sort of try and defend the centre of their armies. We have CPT Gervais, or Captain Gervais, I suppose, who is playing as Rune. He's got some Variac mercenaries here at the front, which obviously very good skirmish unit. Essentially the same sort of philosophy here as with the Belagair archers. Nice shield. Not exactly the most highly damaging archers, but they will at least put up a good fight against other archer units. Flagrim and Gamprim. The Flagrim will be useful against stuff like the Castamir's Legion, but honestly a lot of the enemy infantry that we've seen throughout the field today is not particularly well armoured. Even Umbar have primarily bought their low tier Corsairs, so the AP might not be as useful as it would otherwise be. Another unit of Variag mercenaries. Similar story with the Gamprim, although the Gamprim will always have the Phalanx formation in their favour, so they'll be able to hold enemies at bay provided they are not outranged by enemy pikes. Eastron crossbows, of course. Crossbows can be a pretty good answer to Mumakil as well, honestly, with the amount of damage they can do pretty quickly. But obviously the weakness of the Rune crossbows in particular is the fact that they are really woeful in a skirmish fight. They can be picked off fairly easily, and obviously in melee they're not up to much either. The Narim are essentially the more attack-focused version of the Variant mercenaries. They don't have a shield, they're easier to kill at range, but they are a little bit more damaging, or at least they're a little bit more about they're a little bit more efficient about their killing, shall we say. Just to say that they're more damaging is a little bit not entirely true. We've got some Eastron warriors over here. They're obviously they do better than the Eastron clansmen because they are dual swordsmen. We've got some Carmel's Chosen, some Scion Rim, and we've also got some Balchoth Tribesmen. I don't know if we see the Sapphire Bladesmen because they do have the Throne trait, which means they are a hard counter to Mumakil. We do have the Dragon's Wrath Crossbowmen instead, which may be a little bit more risky in this situation, but everyone knows how powerful they can potentially be as well. We've got some Inas Rim, which are just Lancers, so it's going to be a similar story here as it would be with the Serpent Guard. And over on the other side, a unit of Dragon's Wrath Warlords, which are multiple HP Lancers, similar to the Black Serpents, only they don't seem to be as quick as the Black Serpents, but obviously a little bit more tanky, a little bit more able to withstand pressure. So, without further ado, let's begin. Obviously only 13,000 frames this, so that would lead you to believe that this fight is probably going to get underway pretty quickly. And based on Harad's composition, they will need to be the ones to necessitate some form of offense. If they don't, then Umbar could very easily march forward with their rangers and with their other units of archers and simply pick away at some of their unshielded polearm units, which are making up their... it's not really a square, is it? It's a sort of misshapen polygon. Let's see what's going on over here. The Númenórean Lancers are charging forward, and the Númenórean Lancers, other than the Harajan Raiders, they will not be under any sort of range pressure until they get very close. Obviously, if they get too close, the Demons of the Desert could do extreme amounts of damage. Umbar have spread themselves pretty thin, and it is interesting to note that the Mumakil are heading over towards Umbar. That's an interesting move. Rune are much more densely packed. Hello. You can see that the horse archers are engaging. Rune's cavalry is fairly heavily armoured, but I like the way that the Harad player here has spread his horse archers out. He's put them in multiple different places so that the runic cavalry cannot simply chase them along one axis, although that's some nice hits there on the Harajan Raiders, but I would question whether or not it's worth using your Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen on a unit of Haradrim raiders. Honestly, if I was Longbard, I would be very tempted to keep them there and allow the Dragon's Wrath crossbows to continue wasting their ammunition, because that is a hugely powerful unit that is being used on, honestly, a very cheap unit, relatively speaking, of Horse Archers. And obviously Horse Archers, their primary strength is that they can kite, especially against the Runic Cataphract type units, which are a little bit slower than the swifter Haradrim horses. Oh, just as we see over here, the Serpent Guard charge in. That was a very foolhardy charge, that, from the Serpent Guard, because the Warlords of Umbar are right here, which naturally means the Serpent Guard didn't really stand too much of a chance there, especially seeing as all of the Umbar cavalry was able to get a nice counter charge as well. The Mumakil do have their ranged attack, which is not insignificant. The Mumakil can do quite a lot of damage at range, as well as with their obvious bulk, which can just crash through enemy lines. But the Serpent Guard are now looking significantly worse for wear, as Umbar continue to slowly but surely put some pressure on Harad. And Harad's lack of long-range skirmishers will probably turn out to be a bit of a problem for them here if Umbar continue to advance forward, especially if the Rangers get a hold on all of these Muhad units, because they will make mincemeat of them. Some more Serpent Guard over here. The Haradrim Raiders have taken some fairly heavy losses at this point, but they are also inflicting some damage on Rune, particularly onto Rune's cavalry, which at this point will have taken some pretty substantial damage over time. The Dragon's Wrath Warlords in particular, they need to keep a hold of their HP. They could catch these Serpent Guard, however, and the Dragon's Wrath Warlords are a substantially stronger unit than Serpent Guard, thanks to their multiple HP. The Serpent Guard should be able to escape, if Longbard wills it. Serpent Guard are much quicker than the Runic Cavalry, and you really do need to use that. It looks as though the Serpent Guard are actually just going to stand their ground and fight, which is not the right idea at all, because those Dragon's Wrath Warlords will have a substantial advantage there. The Mumakil just pulling back. And Harad's cavalry is looking worse for wear at this point. The primary strength of most of this Harad cavalry was the fact that it could be used to hit and run fairly well, but so far Harad have taken a more direct approach, which was not really their strength. Both Rune and Umbar have got units better suited for that sort of warfare, the Runic Cataphracts and the Umbar Heavy Knights. The Horse Archers are still online, but the Dragon's Wrath Warlords will be able to survive them to the extent they can continue to chase down these Serpent Guard. The Serpent Guard ran away, but not far enough, and the Dragon's Wrath Warlords just caught back up to them again. Very unfortunate for them. Let's go and see what's happening over here, because as we can see, the Umbar skirmishers did just move into range, and the lack of composite bow units over here is going to prove to be a real problem for Harad. Harad are essentially being forced into a full retreat to abandon their current position, and doubtless the Castamir's Rangers will have done some substantial damage here. Even the Balagire Archers, not really designed around having high missile damage. The Muhad Beast Tamers are going to be one of the worst units for dealing with arrow fire. Needless to say, when you look at them, they're not exactly based around their armour, and they don't have shields. Polearms in general are really bad against skirmishers normally. Those Mumakil are going to need to be used to good effect here to try and salvage this situation for Harad, who have taken the worst of it so far. Initially they were able to bait the use of the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, which was nice, but ever since they haven't really had things go their way. The Dragon's Wrath Warlords are continuing to just hound the Harad cavalry, and you need to keep constant micro on your cabs. If you lose it, this sort of thing can happen, where Rune are essentially slowly but surely whittling down Harad's cav manpower with a single unit of cav which is slower than all of theirs, and they still have that Inas Rim in reserve. The Balchoth tribesmen did move forward momentarily, the Mumakil saw them and backed away. Harad are now in a better position though, their infantry has fallen a little bit further back. Umbar can't afford to chase them all the way with the full force of their army, because if they do, then Rune will simply move in from the side and backstab them. Let's see what's going on over here. So now we can see that Umbar are moving forward. Corsair Pikemen first, with some Castamir's Legion in behind and some Corsair infantry supporting. Umbar may very well try and advance from both directions here, which would be a bold move. Those Inas Rim are getting ready. Unfortunately for them though, there are a lot of pikes on hand. There are also those Corsair Blackguards following them in, so it's going to be tricky to use the Lancers without them taking either substantial damage or routing if they stay too long in the sight of the Blackguards. Harad at this point, Rune, if I was Rune, I'd be feeling a little bit nervous. Harad is sort of manoeuvring around here. Umbar have also sent at least just over half their army, I'd say, getting into a position to get ready to advance on them. So Rune may very well be the meat in this sandwich if this continues. The Narim are in range, however, and this is a problem for Umbar at this point in time. Because their archers were sort of on the Harad front, and now they're going to have to shift over here. In general, Rune brought the most bowmen, so you'd imagine they will probably have the better of this. And also these Corsair pikemen, obviously, it's going to be a similar story with them as it was with the Muhard beast hunters, beast tamers. They're terrible under skirmish fire. The Castamir's Legion will defend some of them, but not all, if this bombardment continues. I do wonder how... I think Umbar should have the better of an infantry fight if they engage quickly, because Castamir's Legion are a unit which Rune will probably struggle to deal with. The Flag Rim will be able to do decently enough against them, but I think overall the numbers that they can support the Castamir's Legion with will probably give Umbar the advantage. And there is also the fact that Umbar have their knights, so even if the Innis Rim get into a position where they can try and get into the back lines, you'd imagine that the Umbar cavalry would probably be enough to chase them down. For Rune, the key here is going to be whether or not they can use some of their close-range projectiles, like their javelins and their crossbows. But the real problem is Harad are also getting into position to attack, and Rune cannot survive if they get attacked from both sides. The Númenórean Lancers charge into the Dragon's Wrath crossmen successfully. The Innis Rim tried to block them, but they were just too late. The Castamir's Legion only took some damage as well. So unfortunately for the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, they were interrupted. Not many of them died, however. They are multiple HP. They're difficult to take down. The Dragon's Wrath Warlords are on their way over. They may not have been able to kill off the Dragon's Wrath crossbow, but the Innis Rim are wavering. Obviously not really equipped to deal with the Warlords of Umbar in a sustained melee. And the Dragon's Wrath Warlords charging off in pursuit of the Númenórean Lancers again. This could be messy, actually. I mean, at this point, Umbar could completely envelop the Runic cavalry. And that does look like what is happening right now. And that means Rune will be deprived of their mounted units, because the Númenórean Lancers will get a nice rear charge, and obviously the Knights, Umbar are going to win that. But I think it's about time we turn the speed down while all of this is going on. And Umbar are trying to spread the engagement. They've got superior numbers, and in many cases superior quality. The Castamir's Legion will cut through Eastron warriors with ease. Here on the front it might be a little bit of a different story. Rune have got a lot more quality over here. They've got the Scion Rim, they've also got the Flag Rim and the Gamp Rim, but the main problem I think is going to be the mixture of so many Corsairs, but they're also backed up by those Castamir's Legion which are embedded in those units. And now there is the fact that Harad are over here. I think, you know, it was fairly clear what Harad were doing when they were manoeuvring around, and it was that moment where Rune probably should have pulled back just a little bit to make it so that they wouldn't be quite so easily enveloped as they are being now. Both Umbar and Harad crashing down upon the runic line like a ton of bricks, and they'll only really be able to hold from the front for a while. After a time, all of this Harad infantry is simply going to come around from the back and do heavy damage. There is the Mumakil still alive, of course, as well, and Harad doesn't need to use the Mumakil in this situation. They would be much better served trying to save that to deal with what's left of Umbar later on, because Umbar are honestly going to be taking the worst of the engagement from Rune as well, seeing as they attacked first. Númenórean Lancers charging into the runic skirmishers. The runic crossbows might be able to get a few telling shots off. Rune might not necessarily win this, but they could decide who does. Now this could be a real problem. Where are the Warlords? The Warlords are still trying to finish off what remains of the runic cavalry, which is in tatters. But this is going to be a problem if they get into a position where they can fire. The Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen could lay waste to this section of the Umbar line if they're not careful. Elsewhere, the Carmel's Chosen were committed to the front line. There aren't many of them, but they're good enough that this sea of Corsair infantry is going to be given a little bit of pause. And yeah, I mean, they were out there all on their lonesome, so this was kind of inevitable. The Warlords of Umbar spot the Dragon's Wrath crossbows and skewer many of them, and that's going to be the end of the substantial threat that Rune could pose. You can see back here the Númenórean Lancers also causing chaos in the runic backlines. Umbar at this point though should probably consider leaving a lot of Rune's defences intact so they can at least do some damage to Harad, because Harad have got a lot of infantry and javelins, and Umbar didn't exactly invest in archers, so they can't simply try and kite them to death. All of these Muhards are coming forward. The Mumakil at this point in time would be a really worrying sight. The Demons of the Desert as well, as we saw in the last fight, can be incredibly damaging. Here on the front line, the Gamp Rim doing their best to hold down the fort, but ultimately there simply isn't enough of them. And what is going on over here? So we can see that there is actually some Haradrim back here, trying to do some damage to Harad already, to Umbar already. This is a good move by Harad. Longbard. It started off pretty worrying for them, but now I think they can see that Rune is going to be crushed in between themselves and Umbar. If they can start doing some damage to Umbar's skirmishers in particular, they will force a melee engagement, and in that situation you'd imagine that the Javelins and the Mumakil will be extremely important, especially seeing as Umbar were the ones to take the front foot here. They'll take more casualties against Rune. Here come the Númenórean Lancers charging into the back of the Carmel's Chosen, and there goes the General.
The enemy general is dead. We have sent the idiot to hell.
But the Carmel's Chosen doing well on their section of line, backing up the Scion Rim, but there's so many Corsairs. Those sprites as well. It seems more obvious than it ever used to be. Muhad Beast Tamers moving in, the Runic Javelins engage, the Runic Crossbows engage, the Harad Bow Cavalry moving around to the back lines, and their infantry continues to push forward, and they have substantially less resistance on this side. Some Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen revealed themselves, so they were hidden. They did actually get some of their projectiles off as well, thanks, you can tell, from the burning corpses. And they're difficult to bring down in melee as well. They have over 20 defense skill, which is a very rare thing indeed. It's something that, you know, even the strongest of Elven units would be proud to have. But the problem here is going to be simply that there isn't enough of them again. Rune definitely found themselves drawing the short straw here, I feel. Again, part of this is knowing when to pull back and when to engage. I mean, Harad knew that they were being beaten on both fronts, so they pulled back and went for a reset, and it's turned out to be in their favour. They may even go on to win this fight if it goes on like this. But Rune decided to stand their ground, which is admirable, but doesn't seem like it's going to yield much in the way of results. Corsair Blackguards are still here in the back lines. Those javelins will be potentially devastating. The Mumakil are over here now. Might be a little bit... I mean, I suppose now is the time if you want to try and get into that big blob over there to deploy the Mumakil. But you do need to be careful, because there are those javelins, which, while the Corsair Blackguards, I don't think they have the thrown trait, so I don't believe they would instantly die. The Mumakil are all bloodied, so the javelins would still be enough to bring them down fairly quickly. And there's still the Black Serpents as well, which as far as multiple HP cavalry goes could be important. Númenórean Lancers getting into the Muhad Beast Hunters. So at this point Umbar have turned their cavalry loose on Harad, which is definitely the right thing to do. There's very little left of Rune, and pretty soon it's going to be a 1 versus 1 between Umbar and Harad, or the remnants of them. The Warlords of Umbar are still looking in fairly decent shape, still 20 of them remaining. They've seen a lot of combat though where the Black Serpents haven't, but I still think they would probably be strong enough to defeat the Black Serpents. That anti-cavalry bonus is no joke, it makes a big difference. That's bold. The Númenórean Lancers charging into the back of these Beast Tamers. When the Beast Tamers turn around, it's going to be lights out for these Lancers, so they need to cycle charge out there pretty quickly. What very little remains of the Runic army is being tidied up by the horde of Corsairs at this point. It's now or never really for the Mumakils. Let's go back up to 1 speed and see how this goes. The Mumakil breaking the stakes. That's a feature which you don't get to see too often. Mumakil run through stakes and they destroy them as they do. All elephants do that, which means I think chariots should be able to do that as well, because in the game files they are classed as elephants.
They have lost half their men.
Just one of those little details. Similar to how in Age of Empires 2 the camels were classed as ships, so that they would be made more vulnerable to projectiles.
My lord, only half our force remains.
Mumakil. Seems as though Harad are using their Mumakil primarily as a ranged unit so far, which now they need to get in there, because if they can do substantial damage to Umbar's numbers, I would suggest Harad would probably have this one in the bag. The Warlords are taking substantial damage. They can't escape. That was a very reckless charge, actually. He went right into the Beast Tamers. At this point in time, saving the Warlords of Umbar would have been really, really useful. But now, the Black Serpents are going to have free reign. And at this point, it's going to be a case of whether or not the Blackguards can keep Umbar's advance going. I'm not sure whether they will be able to. Stuff like the Demons of the Desert are going to be real nasty. Here go the Mumakil. They're going to go right along the line. They're going to go into the Corsair Blackguards. At this point, even if they run amok, it's going to be right in the heart of the Umbar army. They're going to be sowing some chaos in there, so I think Harad will probably take this one home. The damage the Mumakil do will be fairly significant, and as long as... well, actually, the Demons of the Desert may very well have already used their payload, but they're pretty monstrous in melee as well. Not exactly the sort of thing you can send any old rubbish at. Umbar will definitely need the support of their Castamir's Legion if they are to be successful. There's still some Carmel's Chosen holding up a lot of these Umbar units over here. There's some Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. Oh. The sounds of the Mumakil as they lay waste to these poor Corsair Blackguards. They're sort of right in and amongst it. They're still eager. Oh, there goes our Pharazôn. A volley from the Beast Hunters there. The Beast Tamers proving themselves to be good at holding up a lot of the Umbar forces as well. But they are being somewhat isolated. And if this continues, Umbar will be able to slowly but surely bleed Harad's army. If they're not united. One of the Mumakil has also fallen. The Mumakil really need to do some damage. They need to get into this blob here. They need to issue a charge command. They're trying to chase off the Blackguards, but... I mean, the Black Serpents are going to be a key factor in this battle as well. Do the Demons of the Desert still have ammunition? I didn't see them use their javelins. If they can throw their javelins into this big blob of Umbar forces, that would go some way towards a Harad victory. And they do still have ammo. Are they going after the Castamir's Legion, or are they going to try and kill the Pikes? Well, there goes the Corsair Infantry. A lot of the Corsair Pikes die as well. And the Javelins are going to leave, obviously. The Muhard Beast Hunters also coming in. The Mumakil are not running amok, but they do run over their own Javelins while they were busy throwing their payload into the advancing Umbar Infantry. Yeah, I think Harad should probably be fine here. They have all the tools anyway. A lot of their Beast Tamers are breaking at this point. I mean, actually saying that, a lot of their units are broken. They left them fairly isolated and now they're gone. Units of like 65 pikes are not the sort of thing you can afford to lose lightly. And now the Mumakil are dropping like flies. The Corsair Blackguards in range. Enough to tip these Mumakil over the edge. And they're running amok.
Run down those worthless peasants!
Well, what's left of Rune have just been destroyed. Now the Beast Hunters and the Demons of the Desert combining their forces.
The course of this battle changes, because defeat seems almost certain.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see... the main force of Umbar is now made up of melee units, and they have to cut their way through a lot of nasty units. Like the Demons of the Desert don't go down easily. There's also the fact that the Black Serpents can do huge amounts of shock damage, like this, and cause potential routing. Those Blackguards, though, throwing their payload into the Black Serpent bodyguards. Only 3 of them have fallen so far, but there goes the Mumakil running amok. That's really unfortunate for Umbar there. I mean, not many of them got back up either. Because these Mumakil are running amok, but he was running amok in the Umbar lines. If that was the other way round and he was running amok over here, near the Haradrim, that could have flattened a lot of this Harad infantry and could have turned this fight around. But as it is, Umbar have got a lot of pikes, which is making the Black Serpent bodyguard's job a little harder, but they also have a lot of bow cavalry. They've got some berserkers returning. There's returning units all over the field. And the Blackguards are firing, but I think Harad will have too much. I think the Demons of the Desert and the Black Serpents together pose too much of an obstacle for Umbar to come back from this. And yeah, now some Beast Tamers have returned from routing as well, another unit of pikes. an opportunistic victory by Harad, if I do say so myself, but that's fine. I mean, it wasn't as if someone sat back in the corner and camped. Initially, Harad were being quite bold and aggressive, but it backfired, so they had to retreat and start again. And they took advantage of the situation as it presented itself. These Black Serpents doing some nice damage to the Black Guards. Technically speaking, it's not over yet. I mean, there's still these Black Guards, which are not exactly the worst kind of units to have in melee. The Demons of the Desert are also stretched and spread out a little bit. Muhad Berserkers, the Belagair Archers are being targeted by the Harajan Raiders, which is a real waste of their ammunition. They need to be going after the Pikeman. Umbar might pull this back. And this would have been Harad's victory, but if Umbar end up winning it, it will have been because Harad has not exactly done the best job of keeping their armies united together and sort of forming a front against the enemy. They've been a little bit too chaotic in how they've tried to set out their stall. That would be my criticism of Harad, but I mean, I still don't see... These Corsair Pikemen are obviously going to be very good at dealing with Black Serpents, but the shock damage that the Black Serpents can do, I think, is still going to be too much. Those Muhad, they need to face the enemy, not run away. Because if they get charged in the back, even by Corsair Pikemen, this could turn out to be real messy. Haradrim Horn being sounded again and again as the general rotates around the battlefield. Defeat seems certain. The balance of forces is evenly matched. Those Belagair Archers are routing. These Muhad Berserkers need to turn around and support their colleagues. Now at this point the Harajan Raiders are charging in. The Demons of the Desert are still alive, but only just. Yeah, and there go the pikes. That's going to be the end, I think. Harad is pretty fortunate because there was some sloppy play there at the end. It could very well have cost him the fight. If Umbar just had another unit of anything, really, another fully healthy unit of something, they could have. This could have gone very differently. A unit that inspires possibly would have kept those Corsair pikemen fighting for longer, but even so, the Black Serpents are a real significant thing to have fully healthy in the late game. They're so fast, they're so damaging. Very fine shock cavalry indeed, but Harad is going to win this. Makes up for their loss in the previous battle. Their Mumakil the Dead, though, littering the field. You can see this is where most of the action happened here, where Rune spawned. Only a few dead bodies elsewhere during the limited skirmish phase between Harad and Umbar in the early game. But yes, an interesting little free-for-all there. And the one who sent it to me didn't even win, so no one can complain down in the comments. That's the rules that I just made up. But Umbar did get the most kills, which doesn't surprise me all that much, because they did take the offensive route, both against Harad in the beginning, to try and get their skirmishes in place, and also they were the first ones to attack Rune. Harad waited for a little bit before they moved in to try and take advantage of it. Rune, obviously, the unfortunates in this fight, they were the ones that, as I said, found themselves to be the meat in the sandwich. They got attacked from both sides and they didn't have the resources to cover both sides. They needed to pull back a little bit. Even if they left some units there as a rear guard, it was possible then that Umbar and Harad would have fought one another rather than Rune, and they could have been the opportunistic ones. But as it was Harad, and they took advantage of the situation that presented itself. They maybe got a little bit fortunate towards the end. Umbar didn't have more left in the tank. If Umbar managed to safeguard their warlords a little bit better, then they would have had a definite counter for the Black Serpents, and this battle could have gone very differently. Speaking of which, the Umbar cavalry obviously did a lot of damage. Numenorian Lancers in particular used aggressively, getting over 300 kills. One of the units of Corsair Pikemen getting 205 kills. That's impressive for a unit of basic pikes, but I've often found the Corsair Pikemen to do pretty well. They definitely carry their weight very well, and they're obviously quite cheap, so you can mass them up fairly easily for pikes. Casimir's Legion doing okay. Their main strength comes in the fact that they are a very tough frontline infantry unit, very difficult to break down, more so than their overall damage dealing potential. Line infantry don't tend to get huge amounts of kills anyway, outside of like scenarios where the defender's quality vastly outmatches the more numerous attackers. And of course the Rangers getting close to 300 kills as well, getting some nice hits on both Harad and Rune. So yeah, a nice little free-for-all there. I hope you enjoyed this. As I said, the next fight will probably be a mountain pass battle, and in the next week is the start of the next semester. So things will probably slow down a little bit, but I do, as I said, have a Greyhaven Siege in the pipeline, as well as one on Thranduil's halls. So I hope you'll join me for all that.